Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. I am John Schmeelk, joined by Lance Medow. Mr. Medow, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
The players are in the building. There's some energy in here.
Indeed.
Despite Pearson being dour as usual. It's very active here in the Quest Diagnostics Training Center as the players arrive here for camp. We are here in the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. So I know we've kind of done camp previews this whole time, but it's the day the players are here. So I thought we'd get a little bit kind of into the weeds a little bit, which is what we like to do here in terms of what we're going to be looking for at camp this year. We'll talk about some of the big picture stuff, but more of the in the weeds stuff that someone that sits out there at every practice and watches every drill will be keeping an eye on. Lance, usually in June, I'm like, I can't wait to get my couple weeks off and relax. But I said this to Paul last week. I think I'm ready for it to start now. Like, I'm ready to see our first football game in now less than 2 weeks, the Hall of Fame game. We're under 50 days till the first regular season game, which happens to be Cowboys and Eagles. I know that'll be just a hate-to-watch thing for Giant fans, but I'm sure they'll watch it because it's the first game of the season. It's in the division. But I'm excited to get things going here and seeing this Giants team come together over the next 4 to 5 weeks.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that, we've waited long enough. We have speculated. We've gone through the draft. We have tried to put the pieces together with respect to what this roster is going to present, but I think right now we're all itching to get back on the football field. And, throughout the course of the offseason, whenever we talk about the outlook of players and even observations from OTAs, there's only so much you can take away because they don't have the pads on and there's no physicality. So now and remember, this is not going to happen right away. They're not going to go straight into the pads in those ultra physical practices, but we're a lot closer to at least truly evaluating players in the capacity of what we expect come the regular season. So that's what I'm most looking forward to, that maybe we can finally put the speculation on the back burner and start to actually see some tangible evidence out of what may take shape with respect to this roster.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm with you. And you're right, Lance, we're not going to see our first padded practice until the earliest Sunday. They have 3 days of unpadded practices. They build up. They go from an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours. All of those are just in, shells or shorts and T-shirts. They have a day off on Saturday. And then on Sunday, you get your first day of practice. And there's a good chance that could be a padded practice. In fact, I think I have that written down when that first padded practice is going to be. Sunday, it looks like is not a padded practice. I thought so. So they'll come back from that day off. They'll have 2 practices in shells. Then their first padded practice will be Monday the 28th, then Tuesday the 29th. They're off on Wednesday. They're in shells again on Thursday, and then they have padded practices on Friday, August 1st, and Saturday, August 2nd. And then you're kind of in pads more or less for the majority of camp from then on out. But they do a good job of ramping up here, Lance, and being careful in terms of how they get these guys ready so you avoid injuries, which really, when we get into our whole thing here and you talk about what to look for in training camp, the first thing and the most important thing that happens in training camp every year is to keep your team healthy. Because you can't win a Super Bowl in training camp. You can lose your season in training camp if the wrong guys get hurt. So that's always the most important thing, Lance. Keep your guys on the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to any other athlete in any other sport, especially if you're a track and field star. You're not going to go immediately out there and go 100%. You're going to gradually build up. And this is nothing new. We've seen multiple coaching staffs come and go here with respect to the Giants, and they have all followed the same exact philosophy. You ramp up progressively. That's why you said Monday, the first padded practice. Okay, so we're a little less than a week, but they're going to have multiple practices, multiple efforts out on the field before all of a sudden they start amping it up to the level of where guys are going to be hitting each other near the line of scrimmage or down the field. So it's the sensible maneuver. It's no different than what we see out of other teams because, we've seen some pretty notable players go down. And I'm not just talking about the Giants. I'm talking about across the league, whether it's recent history or past history. And if your depth chart is not ready to absorb it, you could be in for a rude awakening before the season even starts, or you now test the front office where they have to now look at some of the street free agents or potentially who may be available on the waiver wire. And that's the last thing that a team wants to have to do, especially after, once again, you put in all that time and homework into bringing guys in free agency and the draft. So I'm sure fans, they want to see the pads get on immediately, but this is the wise game plan. Let them take, even I would say, it wouldn't surprise me if they wanted to push it back even beyond Monday and have a full week before they start. But hey, Brian Dable and company, they've been around the players. They know what they're doing, but that is absolutely priority A, B, and C before you even get to later D. Last thing you want to do is have a guy who also, remember, they've been a few weeks without being on the football field. I'm not saying that the majority of the roster hasn't been working out, but they've been out on their own. They've been with their private trainers or whatever it may be. That's more of a reason why you don't want to throw them back onto the field and expect that everybody's going to be right back into rhythm immediately.
Yeah, and more or less, just taking a look at the practice schedule, they are not going to practice for more than 3 consecutive days throughout camp.
Which makes sense, yeah.
And you're not going to have more than 2 consecutive padded practices either. So again, that's an effort to get the guys ready, but at the same time, keeping them healthy. All right, Lance, I'll let you go first. I know we want to attack this a couple different ways. Guys that have most to gain, things to keep an eye on, camp battle. So I'll let you go first. Hit whichever one of those you want, and then I will give mine.
Sure. Well, I want to start with the players with the most to gain. I think that's by far, John, the most intriguing storyline. Not to say that there's not positions up for grabs, but there
now, define most to gain for me.
Well, most to gain means that, A, you can either solidify a roster spot, so you're on the bubble, okay? That would be my first definition of that.
I like that.
My second interpretation of that would be that you were, and maybe I'm going a little bit too far, but coming off of last season, you were in the doghouse, and it's now an opportunity to remove yourself from the doghouse and put your name back into the spotlight for a positive development. And then the third definition interpretation would be you could very well win a starting job. So those are the 3 factors that I want you to keep in mind, as well as our audience, when we're talking about players with the most to gain. And that by far is on the minds of a lot of players. But there are 2 guys that take the cake in this department, and they're both on the offensive side of the ball. Number 1 is Jalen Hyatt. Okay, Hyatt, who we have seen shown flashes, and we're not talking about flashes in training camp practices, John. We're talking about flashes in regular season game. But he's dealt with the revolving door at quarterback. He's dealt with being in the lineup, then completely disappearing from the lineup. Well, here now, year 3, I can't think of a better opportunity. Also, when you look at the depth outside of the top 3 wide receivers, it's not overwhelming where you're saying to yourself, oh my God, I got to beat out the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th guy. No, you can be the 4th, the 5th, or the 6th guy.
So where he's
after
gaining,
the top 3.
So where he's gaining and has the potential to gain most is to become part of the regular starter rotation.
Without a doubt.
Got it. I'm with you on that. Not fair.
I wouldn't go so far to say that he's getting into the top 3 to be a starter, but you could be a rotational guy and still have a nice commodity and volume of snaps when it comes to the regular season. So he has that. And then I also think year 3, and we talk about this, John, for multiple positions. Critical year, right? Across the board.
Only's got 2 years left until he hits free agency.
So you look at it from that standpoint, you're not just... See, if I'm Jalen Hyatt, I'm not just looking at what can I do for my Giants opportunity. This could also be what can I do for my NFL career moving forward. So that's why it's really twofold, and I led off with him because, and I'm curious your perspective, I don't think there's somebody else that I would skyrocket above him with the most to gain.
I'll give you one.
Okay,
I think Evan Neal.
Which is going to be the second guy on my list.
Heading into his free agency, so he's a guy, Hyatt has 1 more year after this.
Yep.
Evan Neal does not. Changing positions, much like Jalen Hyatt, not penciled in as a starter at the beginning of camp because the Giants have the potential of bringing back and starting their same 5 guys from last year. Brian Dable is not committed to anything in that regard, but he has a chance to win his way into the lineup playing a new position, and we've seen guys moving from tackle to guard in this league create a second life and opportunity for themselves, and I think this is a chance for Evan Neal to do that. You know, Greg Van Roten's an older guy. He's over 30. I assume he's going to get a number of veteran days, which means he's probably going to get Neal will get a ton of opportunities over the course of camp to show that he should be in the rotation or in the starting lineup at guard. So that's the other individual, Lance, that I would put in there that I think does have a lot to gain. Again, not just for his Giants career, but how does he set himself up heading into free agency this offseason? Do the Giants get halfway through the year, he's playing so well at guard, they just want to extend him? He doesn't even get to free agency. You know what I mean? So him, to me, heading into his free agency year is one of those guys that really has the most to gain.
Yeah. Well, and the urgency, that's a fair differential. Neal is going to hit the market, assuming he doesn't re-sign with the Giants, whereas Hyatt still has another year. I guess the way that I'm looking at it more of, and not to say that Neal can't start, but if Neal doesn't win a starting job, I think it's going to be a lot tougher for him to make a significant impact, even for his NFL future, because the best opportunity is put film out there. Right? Show what you can do. If you're not a starting offensive lineman, unless, John, they're really finding ways for you to be a sixth offensive lineman, it's going to be hard for ample opportunities on the field. Whereas Hyatt, okay, he doesn't have to win a starting job, but he could still play and prove that, A, he belongs on the roster or he belongs elsewhere moving forward.
So here's how I'll differentiate it.
Yep.
I think Neal it's more critical and there's more to gain for him, but Hyatt probably has an easier path than Neal
fair.
Does to playing time and snaps. I'm with you on that.
Well, and also the other part of the equation is you could say Evan Neal has a lot more riding on his current and 2 to 3 year future based on this training camp. Whereas Jalen Hyatt, I don't know if he has as much on the line in training camp, but over the course of the season, there's a lot more riding for Jalen Hyatt.
All right, I got one other player for most to gain. I'll go Deonte Banks on defense.
That's fair.
I think, it's going to be a competition between him and Cordell Flott, who's starting at that cornerback spot. Much like Jalen Hyatt heading into year 3. Unlike Jalen Hyatt, he's a first-round pick, so the Giants will have to make a decision on his fifth-year option after this year. So you want that fifth-year option picked up? Play better. And he's got a new coaching staff in terms of his defensive backs coach and cornerbacks coach specifically. Can he put it all together and be a more consistent player? So that would be probably the one other guy that I would put out there for most to gain in terms of guys on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball.
Yeah, the only other player that I want to throw out, John, and I wouldn't put him in the same stratosphere as these three guys, but I think there's an opportunity. You're smirking here at me, so I'm just wondering what you're thinking.
Is it John Michael Schmitz?
No, not John Michael Schmitz.
He's a starter already. That's why I decided not to put him in the conversation.
No, so it's actually on the defensive side of the ball.
McFadden?
Nope.
Okay, I give up then.
Okay.
What do you got?
No, I'm going to throw out, I think, Chauncey Golston.
Okay, I like that.
One of my favorite free agent signings.
Yeah, me too. I liked him too.
Really love the addition because I think he's an under-the-radar guy, even though he's a polished veteran. Very productive from Dallas. I think he's the perfect complementary piece to what they have in the pass rush, but there's a lot of bodies up front, John, right?
There is.
So if you're Chauncey Golston, okay, you're saying to yourself, I'm probably not going to play a high volume of snaps every single game, but I've got to make the most of my opportunities to A, stay on the field and get the numbers and production where I want it to be. So Golston to me is an intriguing, I don't think he's battling for a roster spot, but I think he's fighting for playing time, snap count, and he can maybe elevate himself in that department over the preseason camp to then launch himself right into the mix come week 1.
No question. I agree with you. All right, can we get into the weeds here?
Let's get into the weeds. I'm all for it.
So we've talked about starting jobs. We already mentioned the guard spot on offense. We talked about the cornerback spot. We talked about that a lot last week. Defensive tackle, we've talked about who's starting next to Dexter Lawrence. We've talked about all those. All right, here's some of my deep down the depth chart conversations, which I'm going to find interesting. You mentioned a wide receiver. You have your top 4. You have Amir Smith-Marset, who's your return man at number 5. Do they keep a 6th wide receiver? And who would that potential 6th wide receiver be? I could easily see them saying, look, we have so much confidence in our top 4 guys, we don't need a 6th. The Giants have many times not gone into a season with 6 wide receivers. But can somebody from the Little Jordan Humphrey, Zach Pascal group do enough on special teams to say, all right, we can't lose this guy, right? Can one of the young guys, they have 5 undrafted rookie free agents and wide receiver, can one of those guys make a case that, look, you can't risk trying to put us on the practice squad because I had these 2 monster preseason games. We need to keep you. So the back end of that wide receiver depth chart is something to me, and I'll throw Bryce Ford-Wheaton into that Pascal, Little Jordan Humphrey special team situation. does someone earn that sixth wide receiver spot?
Yeah, I think that's certainly a position to watch. And I would go so far to say, when it's all said and done, John, we may not even be talking about that there is 6 guys.
I agree with you.
I think we could see a cutoff at 5, and that means they'll leave guys on the practice squad. But remember, we don't know how the health of this roster is going to play out, and that's going to dictate a lot more than anything else. But if I just look at the necessity of the roster, and I say to myself, okay, you need your top 3 guys. You need Smith-Marset because you need somebody to be a deadly return guy, and then Hyatt perhaps emerging. I think from a numbers perspective, I think you have enough to start the season. I don't think you're putting yourself in a precarious spot, and you could very well put Bryce Ford-Wheaton on the practice squad. Are you that worried that you would lose him? I'm not.
I'm not either.
And none of these other guys I'm worried about. I'm not worried about losing Little Jordan Humphrey or Zach Pascal, even though Pascal's been in the league for quite some time.
And so is Little Jordan Humphrey. He's been on the at least 4-year career.
So even one of your proven vets, you could store him on the practice squad, and if need be, over the first few weeks of the season, you call him up from the practice squad. That's the beauty of the recent changes to the rules and regulations. You have the flexibility. I know a lot can happen before the season starts, but if you were to ask me to project right now, I'd roll the dice with 5 as opposed to 6.
And I think I would do that too, because, Lance, I don't see how this team doesn't keep 4 tight ends. I think Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger, Chris Manhertz, and Thomas Fidone. And by the way, I didn't even mention, Jermaine Terry, who's an undrafted free agent, but Greg Dulcich, who has another unique skill set.
And has played with Russell Wilson previously.
Yeah, he's probably, the most dynamic downfield threat of the group. But all these guys have a slightly different skill set where I think there's a good reason to keep him on the roster. You think Theo Johnson's your all-around guy that's going to start for you. Daniel Bellinger has done a lot in that fullback, H-back spot. That's his kind of specialty. Chris Manhertz is your in-line blocker. Fidone, as I mentioned, is like your, big potential rookie that you try to slide in there a little bit. Dulcich is your seam. I don't see how you don't keep 4 tight ends. So, and then I'll combine that with the running back, right? Because then we have all 3 skill positions. I think you probably only keep 3 running backs, right? I don't know how, if you're keeping Tracy, Singletary, and Scadaboo, I'm not sure there's room for a 4th guy unless they're going to significantly contribute on special teams. So I think we talked about 5 at wide receiver. Let's say you keep 4 tight ends, that's 9. 3 running backs, that's 12. I think you're looking at probably 12 players from those 3 groups together when you're trying to figure out your roster construction.
And I'll throw in, you're going to keep 3 quarterbacks too.
That's a good point.
Keep in mind.
Good point.
You need the flexibility with respect to the roster. I'm glad you brought up tight ends because while we're on the topic, that to me is the one position battle across the board that I am most interested in. I would say after Theo, but you could probably include Theo, I think the depth chart's wide open, John. I think all of these guys can make a case to be the number 2 guy, the number 3 guy. I think see a lot of movement here.
I think Manhertz is pigeonholed into his role. How you want to rank him on the depth chart, that's fine, but his role is his role. The other guys, I'm with you. I think guys will have the opportunity to earn bigger roles if they play well enough to earn them.
Yeah, I mean, look at the landscape right now of this depth chart that we're taking a glance at, but if you compare this to the rest of the league, how many teams would say Greg Dulcich is perhaps at this stage their 5th tight end?
Right.
Given his experience, I'm talking about. And still the youth movement that is showcased on this roster. Theo Johnson's only in year 2. Fidone was just drafted. And Bellinger, not too many years ago, we were talking about him maybe being the guy. And he dealt with his fair share of injuries. Remember when he had the eye injury and he missed time? But it wasn't as if that was ages ago, John, that we were talking about, wow, Bellinger could really be a playmaker. And I'm not taking anything away from Bellinger, but it's almost like he's become the forgotten individual in the mix, or the stepchild, for the lack of a better phrase, because of some of these other younger guys that have emerged. And that, to me, is the best example to show, hey, if you have a good, productive camp, you could convince the coaching staff, okay, you want to say Manhertz is maybe limited in terms of the versatility, but the other guys, if you want to have some type of a presence as a tight end pseudo wide receiver, especially if, as we're mentioning, they're only going to keep 4, because let's face it, Smith-Marsad is only going to be a special teamer. He's not running out and catching passes. So the tight end...
Though he did tell me in our Giants Huddle podcast that he does want to dip his toe into that pool.
And I don't blame him for feeling that way, but I'm sure if you ask the NFL landscape, a lot of other guys would feel the same way. It's just a numbers game. There's only so many snaps that can be handed out.
I agree with that.
The point is, a tight end could very well be the fourth, fifth option in this offense.
Right.
And multiple guys could establish themselves there.
And those tight ends can always play a big role in special teams, too. So if you can show you can block on kick return, block on punt return, play in all those special teams groups, that'll help you, too, when it comes to finding your way on the field. And then the numbers game at offensive line is interesting, Lance, because, look, I think I'm going to give you 8 names that I feel like are on the roster no matter what, okay? And I could even argue a 9. So the 5 starters that started last year, James Hudson was brought in as a swing tackle. That's 6.
Yep.
Evan Neal would be 7. They drafted Marcus Bowe in the 5th round. That's 8. And I don't know about you. I'd be pretty surprised if Aaron Stinney wasn't on this roster. You know, he was the number 1 guard off the bench last year. He's gotten first-team reps at times over the course of the spring. He's a veteran that I think they trust, so I'd be surprised. And I think they keep 10 offensive linemen, and then you got to figure out who that next guy is going to be. Do they trust Marcus Bowe to be your second offensive tackle off the bench after James Hudson, or does that push Stone Forsythe onto the roster? Does that push Josh Azudu onto the roster? Jake Kubas is somebody that they had really high hopes for last year at guard, but then you're talking about keeping Stinney, Neal, and Kubas. That's 3 backup guards on your roster. I don't know if you want to keep 3 guards, and Neal give you some position flex to tackle. I don't know if you want to mess with that, but those guys aren't necessarily super flexible. Then again, if you keep Greg Van Roten as your quasi-backup center, if John Michael Schmitz gets hurt, well, then maybe you do need an extra backup guard if Greg Van Roten's also a backup center. So I think how the back end of that offensive line group shakes out will be interesting to watch, too.
I view Van Roten as the emergency center as it stands right now.
Emergency or backup?
Well, emergency/backup. I guess I use it somewhat interchangeable.
Well, would you put another center on the roster?
If Van Roten is still there, is what you're saying?
Let's say your starting 5 is your starting 5 from last year.
Okay.
Would you put a Schlottman or a Morrissey on your roster just as the backup center?
No, because I'd be comfortable moving Van Roten there if anything happened to John Michael Schmitz. Because that's why my feeling is I'd rather have more versatility with guard.
I agree with you.
Because here's the thing. If we go down this hypothetical road, John, and John Michael Schmitz gets hurt, okay, so you're going to move Van Roten to center. Now you have right guard open. So I need more guard availability and flexibility than I'm worried about the center position. And I feel a lot better about Greg Van Roten sliding into center than those other 2 guys. Now, Schlottman, I know, has been in the league for some time.
Schlottman has played a lot.
Yeah, he has.
He's a
I'm
good
not
player.
saying that he doesn't have the
He's a good
experience,
player.
but I'd still put Van Roten over him if, once again, I had to flip the switch at center. So, to me, right now as it stands, I want to have reliable options at guard and, most important, players that I feel comfortable that in a pinch, I can move them to right or left. And it doesn't matter, because they either have previous experience there or they've been exposed to that during training camp.
By the way, folks, get on the horn, 201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. You can also drop the comments in to the live chat on YouTube. We can check those out as we go. Johnny Mack, you can monitor that. Anything comes in, you can pop them into the document for us. And then we continue to talk Giants football with you right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. So, Lance, let's jump to the defensive side of the ball here. I think how many defensive tackles they keep will be interesting. So you have Dexter Lawrence, Roy Robertson-Harris, Rakeem Nunez-Roches Nacho, Jeremiah Ledbetter was a veteran addition. You're already up to 4. Darius Alexander was a 3rd-round pick. That's 5. DJ Davidson is someone these like. That's 6. Jordan Riley, 7. Elijah Chapman played a lot last year, 8. And I thought Elijah Garcia, frankly, played really well at the last year. That's 9. You're not keeping 9 interior defensive linemen. So you're going to have to cut guys that either were prior draft picks or free agents you just brought in here this year in order to find your number of defensive tackle. If you want to talk about intense, good-on-good competition, there might not be a better group than the defensive tackle spot as guys are fighting for their roster spots.
Well, you mentioned you're going to have to cut a previous draft pick. If I'm DJ Davidson and Jordan Riley, I mean, those are two guys that I think right now are feeling the heat.
The time's
and
now,
the pressure.
right?
How
Time
could
is
you
now.
not label it? Because remember, Darius Alexander is now coming in. He's the new kid on the block, so he's safe. You mentioned then a lot of established veterans, and Joe Shane, and I'm not saying you should read into this overwhelmingly, but I think he spoke pretty highly of Robertson, Harris, and Ledbetter over the course of the offseason in terms of going out, bringing them in, liking what they bring to the table. So barring an injury or some unforeseen development, I would expect both of those guys to be in the mix. We know about Dex. Let me ask you this, and I've been thinking about this over the last few days. Does Nacho have anything to worry about?
It's the last year of his contract. That's the only thing that always makes you think.
I've been thinking the same thing.
But I think he's been their backup nose for a lot of the spring, as he lamented to me on the Giants Huddle podcast. He's like, every time I try to get out of that nose tackle spot, they keep putting me back in. And I think he's played well enough, and I like what he brings to the table. So someone will have to outplay him in order to take that spot. And I also think he's pretty popular in the locker room. He's
sure.
He's
a great personality.
He's a great locker room guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a good dude overall and a good football player. So, but that's my point. Like, there might be a good football player the team has to let go just because of the numbers game.
Well, as you mentioned, you counted 9, but if we eliminate some of the previous draft picks and perhaps Chapman, I think then you're at a healthy total. And I don't know if you necessarily have to sacrifice anybody because the players that I spoke about, that's a tally of 5 in terms of Robertson, Harris, Dex, Nacho, Darius Alexander, and Ledbetter. So there's room there to maybe even add another guy.
Yeah, you might be able to carry 6 there.
Okay, So maybe Chapman or Davidson once again can reappear. And then the other thing that I think you have to take into consideration, how do perhaps some of the edge linebackers factor into your thinking in terms of what you're working with up front?
Like Chauncey Golston, for example.
Yeah, who to me is interchangeable and extremely versatile. So it's not so much the guys looking at themselves as just the interior group. It's also looking at a guy like Golston who has proven he can go inside and outside.
Yeah, I'm with you, Lance. And I think at corner, I'll jump there next. Just because I think we know what the edge group is. It's really good, and we know who the main guys are going to be there. And linebacker, I think, Karake, McFadden, Muasau, they're all on. They bring in Borden, Flanagan, Fowles as special teams guys. Deontay Johnson's developing. So I think you have a pretty good feel for what those groups are going to look like, right? Corner, though, once you get past Adebo, Banks, Phillips, Flott, who's on the roster after that? That, to me, is a dogfight where you have Corey Black, who was this year's 7th-round pick, but 7th-rounders, as you know, are never guaranteed anything. Trey Hawkins is heading into year 3 here. Can he figure things out and really establish himself as a reliable backup? Art Green is someone that came here late last year. So those are some of the names that you have to watch to see what the back end of that cornerback group can look like. Because, Lance, you know, a cornerback, guys get hurt, guys pull hamstrings, guys do things like that. You're going to need that guy to play at some point. It better be somebody you can count on.
The more and more I look at this group, by the way, you also don't have a lot of experience after the main 4 guys that we listed. Because even Kobe Black is somebody that has not played one NFL snap. Corey Black, excuse me. So you look at this group overall, I don't know if they're going to force themselves, I guess my point is, into keeping guys for the sake of keeping guys. This could be a position, okay? And now we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves.
Late veteran ad.
Yes, late veteran ad or waiver wire.
Yeah, the problem with the late veteran ad is that you're not going to be able to guarantee that guy playing time. So which I think a veteran might hesitate to come along. Waivers, though, guys don't have a choice. If you get claimed, you get claimed.
Sure. And he may look at it as, well, there is an opportunity because now I'm going to a team that has not a great deal of depth, and even the guys in front of me are relatively young. So that, to me, is the position to watch for new arrivals, I guess, as we're really laying things out for the makeup of this roster, because I'm not saying that nobody's going to emerge during the course of camp and preseason, but if we're just evaluating based on what we know and what somebody brings to the table, there's not a lot of commodities that scream out comfort to you at the cornerback position. Now, there's opportunity with that for some of these undrafted guys. They could be saying to themselves, hey, if I really go out and play hard and consistent, I can carve out a role, or I could give them a reason to keep me on the practice squad. But I'm just looking at it from the sole lens of 53-man roster, and I see somebody from another team that has a lot of options that sacrifices a player. He could very well be seeing himself on this Giants roster in no time.
All right, and then the final in the weeds thing I want to bring up here, Lance. Who's the fourth safety? I think we feel really good about Javon Holland and Tyler Nubin and Dane Belton as safeties 1, 2, and 3. Who's the fourth safety? You usually keep 4 of these guys. Is it Anthony Johnson? Is it Raheem Lane? Who's got a little more experience? Is it Makari Page? These are not familiar names to Giant fans, right? So, can you find your fourth safety in that group that you can rely on?
And I would add that to another position that they could very well look to add a veteran or grab somebody off the waiver wire. If I'm the Giants too, I'm experimenting a little bit because of what we're looking at on this roster, where if they want to entertain moving a corner to safety and seeing what a cornerback can do, it may not hurt. And sometimes corners, we see it maybe a little bit later on in their careers, like a Charles Woodson per se, where in order to get a few more years out of their body, they move over to the safety position. Now, nobody screams at me in the Woodson department in terms of experience, but I don't see, again, an overwhelming one guy that jumps out and says, hey, this is even my position to lose. You threw out Raheem Lane, who was with the Chargers, and then Anthony Johnson Jr. is with the Packers, okay? So they have NFL experience, but even those 2 players, we're not talking about bring a wealth of been there, done that type of stuff.
And that brings you to the roster move the Giants made today, which might actually answer 2 of the things we just talked about. The Giants did sign Kayvon Wallace. He was a day 3, I think a 5th-round pick by the Philadelphia Eagles a few years back. He was a guy that I really liked coming out of Clemson. If you remember back to our draft shows that year, he's one of those kind of safety slot corner hybrid players. He's not your bigger safety. He's a guy that can go into the slot. And then this goes back to, by the way, one of our YouTube questions came in about this from Thomas Joachim. Was the safety they just signed any good? And look, Kayvon Wallace is a guy that has been in the league for a little bit. He, again, is kind of one of those, he's only 27 years old. He was with the Seattle Seahawks last year, listed as a safety, but he's one of these guys that's, height, weight, speed-wise is not one of your bigger safeties. He's a smaller guy. He checks into just 5'11", 205, which is more of, that 205 is kind of safety size, but if you watch him in college, he played a lot of slot corner, so maybe he will give the Giants a little bit of depth at both those spots as somebody that has played in the league and has played a decent amount of time on the field. He has 19 starts in his career and has played in 17 games. He played in 17 games and started 12 in 2023 for the Titans and the Arizona Cardinals. And he started 7 games for the Eagles in his first 3 years there. So is he a star? No. But do I think based on what he's done, he would be my leader in the clubhouse for the 4th safety spot? Does he also give you some corner flex inside? Yes. My answer to that would be yes.
Here's also why he'd be my leader in the clubhouse. He has experience playing for Shane Bowen because Bowen was with him in Tennessee in 2023.
And started 7 games for him.
So there's a lot to read into. To me, the way that I'm reading into this, Shane Bowen, I think, feels they need help at safety. And he's saying to himself, okay, since it's this late in the offseason and training camp is just starting, I want to bring in a player that knows my scheme and knows my system. So I think both of those factors bode very well for him, and he runs circles and laps around a lot of the other players currently on the roster, even those that have been in the league. So I would think right now you're going to keep 4 safeties, even though Wallace, once again, is just getting sized up for a Giants uniform. He, to me, moves ahead of whoever currently was here during the course of the spring.
No question about it. Jan in the chat wanted to ask about Darius Slayton. We didn't mention him in the wide receiver conversation. And I think that's because Lance and I feel pretty secure about what his role is going to be. They just paid him this offseason a good amount of money, wide receiver 3 type of money. And I think he's the Giants wide receiver too. I think that's where he checks in. He's got good deep speed. He's a veteran. He knows what he's doing. I think Darius Slayton will be very comfortable being a good perimeter speed threat opposite Malik Neighbors.
Hey, they keep bringing him back.
Who's more consistent than Darius Slayton every year? He gives you the same exact thing. It's boring, but it's good.
Yeah, they always say, how many lives does a cat have? Well, I mean, Darius Slayton, I think, has surpassed the 9 lives of a cat because, right, every year we talk about him. Is he going to move on or does he have to take a pay cut? I mean, how many things has he survived and then has come back and hasn't just been a good story because he's hanging around. He's been a productive player within the scheme. I don't think there's really anything to dissect or discuss. I think you know exactly what you're getting out of Darius Slayton. If you went over the offensive side of the roster from top to bottom, he's probably the most reliable player, right?
Really
I mean, in terms of you don't have to play a guessing game. You know what he's going to bring to the table.
He's rarely hurt.
Yeah. Holds up. Durability is not a question. So all of those factors is really why it's not that he doesn't deserve the attention. It's just there's not much to speculate about Darius Slayton. He's made his intentions clear going back to when he re-signed with the team, and I think the team has made it clear where he stands.
All right, so we got 2 questions here about the quarterbacks. Jamal Jones, I'm looking forward to see how many first-team reps Jameis and Dart receive as camp progresses, and Jace Turney wants to know, hey, fellas, what is more interesting competition, cornerback number 2 or quarterback 1-2? Well, I think, and I'll answer this as one question here, the quarterback competition's more interesting because I think I could see a world where either one of those guys are your starting cornerback week 1. Lance, if Russell Wilson's healthy, do you see a world where he's not starting for the Giants in week 1 of this year?
No, I do not see a world.
Neither do I. I know that might frustrate some Giant fans out there. I don't see a world. I don't see it. He's had enough consistency across his career where even his last 2 years or 3 years, which I know weren't to the level of his peak Seattle seasons, Lance. I mean, again, I love Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston has never had years like that. 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratios where you protect the football, you make consistently big plays down the field, and more importantly, protect the football and don't turn it over. So, and I would be, look, am I going to rule out Jackson Dart doing so great that he forces their hand to start week 1? I'm never going to rule anything out. Anything's possible. I would be extremely surprised if that happened.
Well, if you
extremely.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
if
I'm
you
done.
look
Go.
at what I was going to bring to the table, and for those tuning in for quite some time, I may have brought up some of these examples in the past, so apologies for repeating myself, but I think it's relevant. Off the top of my head, if you look at situations where a rookie quarterback came in and moved up the depth chart over the course of camp, Russell Wilson is a perfect example, okay, because that offseason Seattle got Matt Flynn, okay, who was Aaron Rodgers' backup. However, Flynn was banged up and beat up that training camp, which a lot of people don't bring up in the conversation. He did wow Pete Carroll and company. I'm not taking anything away from Russ, but Matt Flynn also, I believe it was a wrist injury, and that also helped Russell Wilson leapfrog. Okay, so there's one example, but once again, the veteran got hurt.
Never give the young guy the opportunity, right?
Because you're going to regret it. Then the second example that I'll bring up is when the Eagles drafted Carson Wentz, okay, you had Sam Bradford on the roster. Now, that was the year that Teddy Bridgewater got hurt in Minnesota. So Rick Spielman, their general manager, needed a quarterback to bring in because Teddy went down late in camp, and they made a trade for Sam Bradford. So all of a sudden, you got Bradford, you got Chase Daniel. Carson did enough to make them feel okay, and Minnesota did not have leverage. They had to give up some good assets. Yep. So Philadelphia said, well, we already drafted a quarterback, might as well get a pick back so that we can use that elsewhere. So those are the 2 examples that come to mind. But once again, you need an injury or you need, John, somebody to lose a quarterback that right now we're not anticipating, and maybe somebody picks up the phone and says, hey, what do you want for Russell Wilson or Jameis? And it would have to blow the Giants away, and Jackson Dart would have had to be so impressive in the classroom and on the field. Notice I'm throwing out, 17 different factors that have to fall into place in order for all of those things to align.
I agree with you. And I'd be surprised if Jameis got that many first-team reps over Russell Wilson because I think you know what those 2 guys are. They've had a long enough NFL career. I think they will try to sneak Dart some first-team reps just to give him some work with the first team, given his potential quarterback of the future. That's why you draft a guy in the first round, right? So I think Brian Dable talked about this. You put him in even when he's not expecting it to see how he handles it. Throw a play at him. Okay, Jackson, go run this play. And you put him out there and you have him go. But guys, they're going to try to get Russell Wilson ready for the year to win some football games. That's what they're going to do. We got a couple more questions from YouTube. I'll get to them in just 1 second, but I want to get to the calls here at 201-939-4513. Let's go to Antonio in Schenectady, New York. Antonio, what's up?
Hey, what's going on, you guys?
We're good, man. What's going on?
I wanted to ask, what are you guys' expectations for Chauncey Golston's role on the team? He's coming off a career year with Dallas. He did sign a 3-year deal here, and he's currently the number 4 edge rusher. And Joe Shane has also talked about him playing on the inside as well, rushing from the inside.
I would not be surprised, Antonio, and I've kind of posited this from the beginning, and I could end up being proven wrong. I thought his best snaps for the Cowboys came as a pass rushing 3 technique. That's where I thought he made the most plays. That's where I thought he was the most impactful. Now, he's not big enough to play there on early downs. They're going to just run right at him, and they're going to truck him out of there. He's 270 pounds. But I do think on third downs, my goodness, if you could run out a third down pass rush package with Dexter Lawrence and Chauncey Golston inside, Burns and Thibodeau on the edge, with Abdul Carter as your kind of 5th stand-up rusher, your joker rusher rolling behind the defensive line, that to me is your ideal pass rush package. So I think Golston will get just as many, if not more snaps as a hand-in-the-dirt third down pass rusher as he does a stand-up 3-4, 5-man front outside linebacker on early downs against the run. I thought that's where Golston, personally, made his most impact as a pass rusher last year.
Well, Golston played 72% of the snaps with Dallas last season, so that's a big reason why.
It's not going to be that high this year.
Correct. That's a big reason why he had a career year. Now, we had somewhat of a similar conversation on a previous program. So if you look at Shane Bowen's snap counts for his defensive lineman pass rushers last season, and I'm bringing it up just so that we can use this as a means of comparison, I want to see who got over 65%. Just as perhaps a comparison. So Brian Burns was at 79. Mm-hmm. Thibodeau did not get to 65. He was at 54.
That's only because he missed a bunch of games due to injury.
He did.
Though. Correct.
But you got to figure somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to miss time. So I don't think the numbers are going to be that crazily off. Bobby Okereke at linebacker was at 67. And that's pretty much it. So I would be very surprised if Golston gets to 72. I think more reasonable in the 60 to 65% barometer. Do you think he can get that high, or do you think he's going to be
50 to 55?
All right,
with all these guys, it's going to be hard to get him on the field.
Well, the reason I'm saying is that, and this is why I say Golston has a lot to gain, going back to earlier conversation, because he's going to have limited snaps, and that means he has to make, to use the baseball analogy, he has to make his at-bats count.
Yeah,
every single. So if he's going to be that third down guy that you mentioned, he's going to have to find ways to get to the quarterback and maybe get a sack or two from the interior, knowing that he's not going to get as many opportunities on the outside, and that's just the numbers game crunch that a guy like that is looking at. But to me, Golston can emerge if somebody in this pass rushing group, like a Thibodeau, misses 3 or 4 games. That's where all of a sudden the green light is there for Golston, and then I think you really get your bang for your buck there.
I agree. I agree 100%.
Look, Antonio, yeah, go ahead. You got a second point?
Yeah, if I could think another question, if that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Do you guys think Gabe Davis is still an option? I know he had a visit with the Giants like 2 months ago. He knows Dable and Shane well, obviously. I was just curious about that.
I don't think he's washed. I mean, he's not. I don't even think Gabe Davis is 30 years old yet, is he? I could be wrong about that, but I'll look up his age.
No, he's 26 actually.
Yeah,
27. 27, I think.
He's young. I mean, he's a guy that. He's a bigger guy. He's a possession guy. He's not like super quick. He's a bigger body guy. He can get downfield a little bit. I'm just not sure if you're signing Gabe Davis, you're basically telling Jalen Hyatt that you're not going to play. And I don't think the Giants want to go down that path, given what Jalen Hyatt showed them in the spring. I mean, he's gonna want to, wherever he goes, you're gonna have to promise him some level of playing time, I think, to get him because he's going to want to play. And I don't think right now, Antonio, I mean, who would you take snaps away from to give to Gabe Davis? I guess my question would be for you.
I do think Gabe is a better, like, if it's strictly off making the team better, like, I do think he's better than Jalen Hyatt. But I don't know if they just flat out just like get rid of Hyatt completely from like a depth role.
Well, in fairness, he's a completely different player from Jalen Hyatt. I think that's what's important to note. Gabe Davis, if you go back to when he was in Buffalo with Diggs, Davis was the intermediate route. Okay, he was the insurance blanket for Josh Allen, worked the sidelines and was a solid player, and then cashed that in when he went to the Jaguars, and then they wound up making some financial moves, which is life in the NFL. So it's not so much to me subbing Davis for Hyatt. It's going in a completely different direction in terms of the style and the route running. And that's the other thing that you have to take into consideration. And I think the Giants currently have on the roster what Gabe Davis would provide. So I don't know how much you're differentiating yourself. And we appreciate the phone call. We're getting some feedback here.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Antonio. The way that I would look at it is it's a good guy to keep checking in with if he's available. Somebody goes down in training camp. You know he's familiar with Joe Shane. He's familiar with Brian Dable. You can bring him in. I just don't know if there's an overwhelming urgency right now as camp starts to throw him into the mix.
4.54 guy at the NFL Combine, 1.56 split, 35 vert. Pretty decent explosive jumping numbers. But look, he did have some years where he was the Bills' kind of big downfield threat. He averaged 17 yards a catch in 2022, had just 48 catches but 836 yards, so he made some big plays for them that year. But again, has he proven more than Jalen Hyatt so far in the NFL? Absolutely. Jalen Hyatt's never had a year where he had 800 yards or even 746 yards, which Davis had in 2023. So, to your point, yes. But again, that would still make him wide receiver 4 here. He would still have to play over Darius Slayton, who they just paid this offseason. And he's not a guy you would put in there instead of Wan'Dale Robinson. To your point, completely different players. So I just don't think, unless he's willing to come here on like a minimum as a depth piece that is fine without playing a ton, I'm just not sure that's something that makes sense.
And remember, camp is just starting, so it's not just him versus the Giants, it's him versus opportunities across the league. And we don't know how that's going to play out. He may have had conversations with some other teams. I may be mistaken. I thought he chatted with the Steelers, too, this offseason as a potential destination. That could be maybe off base, and that was just basically speculation.
According to Google AI, again, take that with a grain of salt, artificial, sometimes not also accurate, has visited with several teams, including the Steelers, the Saints, and then they also mentioned the Giants.
So there we go. I'll pat myself on the back.
Yeah, no problem.
Yes.
But look, could the Steelers use a number 2 wide receiver? George Pickens isn't there anymore, and they brought in DK Metcalf.
Well, a lot more than the Giants could, I would argue.
100%.
And opportunity for a guy who is 26, looking to regroup after one season with the Jaguars. You can understand that he may be keeping his options open.
And frankly, Olave and Rashid Shaheed have had so many injury issues that I could see the Saints being an attractive situation too, based on how many games those guys missed last year.
Though, and I know beggars can't be choosers, I think you'd rather have Aaron Rodgers throwing you the football than whoever may be under center with the Saints. And I think your facial expression tells it all. So if I was Gabe Davis, I don't know. I think it's a relatively easy decision if it's between both of those teams.
And remember, Gabe Davis's rookie year in Buffalo was 2020. So he obviously was there with Brian Dable. So Brian Dable has a really good feel for him and the type of player that he was. He was with Dable for 2 years there in 2020 and 2021. So the Giants know exactly what he's about and whether or not they think he would be a fit here. But to me, I'm with you. That's, all right, somebody got hurt in camp. We have an opportunity. Break in case of emergency type of deal. And I'm sure that's what Gabe Davis's agent is telling Gabe Davis. Don't just sign somewhere to be like the 4th or 5th wide receiver.
What's the point? Yeah.
Find the place where there's going to be an opportunity for you to play, to earn that playing time, and then you had free agency again next year. Maybe there's more of an opportunity, more of a need somewhere, and that's something he can cash in on. All right, let's go to a couple other questions off of YouTube. Cribs and Ribs. What do the injury updates look like coming into training camp? The Giants have not announced yet, as far as I've seen, Johnny Mack, unless I've missed something, that They have not put anyone on PUP yet or anything like that. So I have not seen that yet. They did do the conditioning test today. I'm sure we'll hear about that by the end of the day. I was hoping we would get something about that over the course of the show. If you want to do a quick Twitter look there, Lance, make sure no one's put anything out there. But I had not seen anything as of the start of the show. So keep an eye on Andrew Thomas in the foot. That would be the number one guy. If he started on PUP, that would not shock me. We'll have to wait and see. Dexter Lawrence with the elbow. Again, he was doing individual in the spring. I think he'll be fine. Malik Neighbors, Cam Scatabo, Darius Alexander, guys that did various amounts of work over the course of the spring. Brian Dable never seemed overly concerned with any of those guys, so not that worried. Those are the main guys, Lance. I'm thinking there's one more, but I don't really remember. Theo Johnson was coming off the injury, but he did plenty in the spring.
And he also said he was looking good in terms of his outlook when he spoke to the media.
Runyon did more and more as spring went along. I don't think there's any reason to believe that he's not going to be good to go. Dex with the elbow I mentioned, but I think he's going to be fine. No one else really jumps out at me, Lance, that I would have huge concerns with injury-wise.
Yeah, I'm with you. The only person that I could see, them putting on there is if they just want to take it slow with a player,
right?
And they need to buy themselves maybe a roster spot here or there. But there's no one that was a red flag, at least to me, during the spring, and no one that we heard of anything over the last few weeks that may have had a setback. So it really would be a surprising development. But if they do ultimately put one of the players we're talking about, to me it's more of maybe, hey, we don't necessarily need him on the field immediately. We need some roster flexibility, and then we'll ease him in, as opposed to they're worried about his accessibility come week one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't think that's going to be much of an issue either. Folks, don't forget, go check out the Giants Huddle podcast. You can check out all the player interviews I've done over the last month. If you haven't seen them, we go position by position. We have some standalone ones in there as well. You can find them all at giants.com/podcast, the Giants YouTube page, Giants app. Again, the Giants Huddle podcast. Check out our player interview series. It is all there for you to check out. And, of course, Giants Huddle podcast is brought to you by Citizens. Run or walk with Giants legends. The Giants Foundation will host a 5K racing kids run presented by Quest on Sunday, October 26th at 9 a.m. at MetLife Stadium. Net proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative t-shirt after the race. Stay for a post-race festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. Register now at giants.com/5K. The Giants Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. All right, again, YouTube comments, put them in there. We're monitoring that. Or get on the line. We could take a couple more calls here. We got about 7 minutes to go in the program at 201-939-4513.
I was crunching some of the numbers, and I just want to circle back. We were talking about Kayvon Wallace and the safety position.
Yeah.
Just to put things in perspective, John. So Wallace has appeared in 71 games over the course of his career. I looked up, just as a means of comparison, Raheem Lane and Anthony Johnson Jr., who are the other two, at least veteran safeties. If you combine both of those guys, their appearances, you're talking about 34 games between both of them combined. Compared
Starts or total?
Total. I'm talking about games. Okay, starts, it's even less.
Right. That's why I asked.
Raheem Lane has started one game in his career, and Anthony Johnson 4. So they only have 5 starts, and then if you look at Kayvon Wallace has 19. So the point is, there's a distinct difference between the guy they just added to the roster versus the other two that they've had. And in fairness, just because you don't start, it's more of snap count is a better indicator than whether you're on the field for the very first play on defense, which to me is a little misleading. And there are special teams guys that would argue, hey, we don't go down as a starter, and we've played a lot more than some of those offensive or defensive guys.
Yeah, and the quality of those snaps obviously matter as well when you take a look at it. All right, let's go back to the phones at 201-939-4513. Our final call of the show. Let's go to Artie up in Providence. Artie, what's happening?
Hey, good afternoon, guys. Thanks for taking the call.
Thanks for calling in, Artie. What do you got?
Oh, you're welcome. I'm really high on Jalen Hyatt this year, guys. I know you talked about him early in the show. And he's 23 years old, and I think he's got the potential this year to really, really be a game breaker on this offense.
What gets me excited, Artie, is that I look for reasons for things to change, right? When you have a guy that's been here for 2 years already and frankly has not earned his way onto the field and has not made the most of his opportunities, I say, all right, well, why are things going to be different this year? So the first thing is the player. And you take a look at the player, and he gained 20 pounds this offseason, and his GPS numbers did not change. That was a big worry for Jalen Hyatt. Lance, I mean, we talked ourselves to death about that when he was coming out in the draft. He only weighed 170 pounds, couldn't deal with press at the line of scrimmage. Does this help him overcome some of that? The second thing I look for, Artie, is usage. Is the usage going to be different? Well, it certainly appears that he's going to get more chances to operate in the slot, which is where he operated a lot in college. Is that going to help him? The third thing is situation. And I look at Russell Wilson as the quarterback throwing the ball now, who wants to go deep and go down the field, which is Jalen Hyatt's strength. So if you put all three of those things together, Artie, I think there's an opportunity for him. Now we have to see if he can take what he did in shorts and a T-shirt in the spring and now also do that in pads, in preseason games, in joint practices. Can he continue being that effective once the intensity level gets ratcheted up a little bit?
And then the fourth thing that I would add, which is really an extension of the last one, Russell Wilson, unsolicited, talked up Jalen Hyatt when he arrived on the scene this offseason.
Called him the day he signed.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't talk about Darius Slayton necessarily or Wan'Dale Robinson or the tight ends. He specifically talked about Hyatt. So you have a quarterback that is invested personally in the young wide receiver. We know Russ loves to throw the deep ball, which goes back to what John said, who's at the controls, and you go wherever Russ has been, Seattle, Denver, Pittsburgh, he's always leaned on somebody for the home run ball. So, I mean, that to me, if I'm Jalen Hyatt, that excites me, the fact that the guy throwing me the ball, the targets are coming from somebody that is very excited to be alongside me.
Yeah, absolutely right. Can I just squeeze in one other question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Artie.
Thanks. Noel Fant, he's 27. He was released by Seattle the other day. Any talk of maybe picking him up or just trying him out at tight end? He had 130 catches last year, 1,400 yards.
No, he didn't have 130. I don't know about that. I think you look at targets. I think you're talking about targets.
Yeah, I mean, that might have been his last couple years put together.
You know what? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Don't worry about it. That's all good. No, look, Noah Fant is shown to be a pretty solid wide receiver, pretty solid tight end. He can run the seam. He's tall. He's athletic. He kind of is in the Greg Dulcich mode, Lance, in my opinion, in terms of how he plays. So maybe, but like we talked about, Artie, we both think tight end is one of the stronger positions on the roster, so I'm not sure that's necessarily where you're looking to add somebody. My guess is that he'll find a better opportunity somewhere else where they really do need a tight end that can maybe start, and that's probably where he would end up landing.
I think Noah Fant is very similar to the Gabe Davis conversation we were having earlier. It's a numbers game. I don't think there's a clear, attractive pathway currently on the Giants roster. I mean, I was talking about I'm paying attention to tight end right now as it stands more so than any other position. And even though, once again, he has been at least productive and he's worked well in multiple tight end sets, meaning he's been on teams where he's not the guy. He has to share playing time. So it would actually fit well, that mindset with the Giants, but I think he's probably going to have more attractive suitors who are in more of a need to bring in a tight end that can offer him opportunity and playing time.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate it, and go Big Blue.
Yep, appreciate it, man. By the way, the conversation in the chat is pretty good. A lot of fans going back and forth having good debates about the Giants, which is really good to see. All right, I had two more YouTube comments, that I want to get to. Edward Scissorhands. I hope to see a lot of two inline tight ends with Bellinger and Scatterbo in the backfield this season. Well, that would be, for the fans that don't know how the nomenclature works, that would be 22 personnel. Because I'm assuming he's counting Bellinger not as one of the two inline tight ends if he's in the backfield, which means you're going to have three tight ends. Though, depending if you want to count Bellinger as a tight end or a fullback in that situation, that can either be 13 personnel, which is one running back, three tight ends, or 22 personnel, which is two backfield guys and then two tight ends. If they're in the backfield, I think it would technically be 22 personnel just because of where the alignment is. But I don't know. Brian Daboll has always run a ton of three wide receiver sets. That seems to be what he wants to do, Lance. And
that's today's NFL.
We're going to have Warren Sharp on the Giants Little podcast in a week or two. And Russell Wilson's production in 11 personnel versus 12 personnel is much, much, much better. He's been much better in three wide receiver sets. So I think you're going to see plenty of that. And it's funny because remember, Daboll used to be a tight ends coach. Like that was his thing. So could we see some more, double tight end sets? Sure. But look, I think Dable wants explosive plays, and you get explosive plays not by having 3 tight ends on the field at the same time. You need to get speed out there and guys that can make people mix and make explosive plays.
Yeah, it's not to say that the Giants are not going to be able to run the football. They need to, and it moved in the right direction last season. But the one thing that has been missing from this offense is explosion, big game-changing playmaking ability, and then the most important, points. And I just don't think you're going to get that if you aim to methodically move up and down the field. I think you got to go for the home run as opposed to the singles and the doubles, and you'd be sacrificing a lot of explosion if you're looking to put Bellinger and Scatterboo on the field and expecting those guys to just run people over. And you can get explosion out of Scatterboo with additional wide receivers because he can be an extension as somebody that catches the ball out of the backfield or gets open lanes up the gut because there's so much focus on the wide receivers to the outside. So I think you could create that. I'm all for moving Scatterboo around. I like that philosophy. I just don't know if you have to put bigger personnel on the field thinking that you're going to get creative. I don't know how much that is going to help them in the long run.
God's Will 64, Cam Scatterboo 900 yards this season. Book it. So that goes to your point. Let's see how much he gets on the field. And that's another interesting thing. It's not really a training camp thing. It's more of a game thing. How the Giants split the running back carries to me is going to be fascinating. I'm really curious to see how they work that. Jace Turney, what's a storyline that might not be getting as much light as it should be? I think we hit a lot of that with the in the weed stuff, Lance. Anything else that comes to mind for you that, something that not enough people are talking about?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we talked about the tight ends. We talked about the number of offensive linemen. I'm just perusing.
How about
Chauncey Golston I threw out, which I think.
How Shane Bowen adjusts his defensive scheme this year with different players? How about that one?
I just don't know if that's going to be answered in camp.
No, it won't be.
Yeah, okay. If
It
you're
won't
talking
be.
about
I agree with
that's
you.
more of a season thing, John.
I agree. He didn't specify training camp, so I'll cheat.
Okay, then I'll allow you to cheat, okay? We've consulted with the jury, and they've come back. They will allow it. I was just thinking more of the small sample size
and I'm
of
with you on
training
that.
camp.
Yeah, he's not going to show what that's going to look like.
No, he's not going to show. How are you going to be able to answer that
Absolutely
question?
Right.
Yeah, so it's going to be difficult in terms of that. But I think we covered just about everything. And I think some of the things that we covered, for example, who's going to be the fourth safety, you could put that as an underlying conversation. I don't think the world of the nation is wondering who's going to be the Giants' fourth safety.
And who the 9th and 10th offensive linemen are going to be. No.
So that tells me that's
only
not.
Sickos like us are worried about that.
Yeah. Well, here's one thing that we actually haven't talked about that I'll throw out.
All right, and then we got to wrap.
What about, Graham Gano bouncing back?
Ooh.
And I mean, you could tell that in the preseason.
All right.
I'll go with that. I don't know if that's being discussed enough. We know that he's the guy, but, there has been some ups and downs and injuries.
Injuries mostly,
so
yeah.
I think what to see out of Gano, whether it's during practice, during training camp, during preseason games, depending on his usage, I would think that fits under what the commentator said on YouTube about a storyline that not many people are talking about. I'll put Graham Gano atop that list.
I like that. I think that's good. And I could tell, Lance, that people right now are ready for training camp to start. They're tired of calling in and asking the same questions about what's going to happen to camp, what's going to happen to camp, what's going to happen to camp. I think people are holding their powder now for the guys to get on the field tomorrow for the first time. And something tells me at 2 o'clock tomorrow, the phone calls are going to be popping a little bit more. And remember, guys, for the next few weeks, we're at 2 o'clock. That's to accommodate the practice schedule. They practice from 10 to 12 every day. I know what you're thinking. Well, then come on at 12:30 right after practice. But they have media availabilities from like 12:15 to 1:15. So we want to see practice, hear from the players, then we'll come on with you and talk about them at 2 o'clock. It'll also give us a chance to squeeze in like a 15-minute lunch.
That's the most important.
Well, that's
I
number
can't
one.
believe you waited till the end to say that.
Well,
that should have been the lead rationale as to why the show is at 2 o'clock.
I tried to do the show at 1:30, but Johnny Mack and Pearson basically said, no, we're just not going to do it.
Well, and I support their cause,
They need
by
to
the way.
eat.
Yeah, listen.
Well, and, the Tino has to have his 2 baked potatoes and like 4 chocolate chip cookies. Otherwise, the Tino's going to come on the show
The lunch of
and
champions.
eat his cookies on the show, which is what he does. He has done that. Pearson's here. I was telling him he wanted to do the show at 1:30, but you and Johnny Mack refused because you need to eat lunch after media avails was over. Correct. So we'll be at 2 o'clock for the rest of camp. Make sure you tune into that. Thank you for being with us on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. And we will be with you in the podcast studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better for the next 3 weeks for training camp. Then after that, all the practice times, Pearson, from what I've seen, are all TBD. after we get past that Bills game. So after that, we'll figure it out. We'll try to keep it at 2 o'clock. Otherwise, really, it's either going to be 2 o'clock or we'll go back to 12:30, and that'll be our time the rest of the way. So one of those two, just stay tuned when we get the practice schedule, which will probably be like the day after the Bills game. We'll share it with you and let you know when that show's going to be.
Go. See, that's the most overlooked storyline coming into training camp.
The practice schedule after the Bills game?
No, what time BBKL will be in the second half of training camp. There you go.
And that is always a mystery, by the way. Every year, practice moves around a lot. So make sure you go check that out.
We'll be taking over-unders, by the way, moving forward on that. Yeah.
Yes. By the way, aren't you guys surprised that Tino didn't just show up today to see the players in the building for the first time? He was not here.
I'm surprised he wasn't at the door greeting everybody.
Well, maybe he was. Maybe he was here from 6 to 9 this morning, and we just didn't see him.
Yeah.
We should have the Tino shoot arrivals.
He was in the bushes observing people coming and going and taking notes.
He was in the high grass of the swampy Meadowlands with his binoculars.
Correct.
With his little head peeking out.
He's got potential to be the fifth safety on the roster this year. Yeah, based on his stride. The stride was very strong coming into this.
Keeping track of what players have new cars.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but I don't know if that is a part of the equation. I think it's more of how they walk, the amount of energy they showcase, the enthusiasm. Okay. Correct. He's that type of guy in terms of his analysis.
That's a fair point. Yeah. For Lance Medow, I'm John Schmeelk. That's Big Blue Kickoff Live, and we'll see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock after our first practice, media availability, and press conference from Brian Dable and Joe Shane. Make sure you check that out tomorrow on Big Blue Kickoff Live at 2 o'clock. We'll see you then.